Welcome to the Active Motion Move Better, Feel Better podcast with our guest today, our first guest, Rob Shenton.
Hello.
Thank you for coming on, Rob.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Rob, for those of you that don't know, to me, is a high-performance running athlete, and he is off to the Winter Invictus Games, which is being held where this year, Rob?
In Canada, Vancouver and Whistler in February.
Nice. So obviously, you have to have a military-esque background to be able to be invited to that. But also, you've had a bit of an unfortunate journey with an accident as well.
Yeah, so it was developed years ago by Prince Harry, but then taken on by the Invictus Games Foundation. And I think it was, 2014. I'll probably get that wrong, but 2014, 2012 was the first year. This is the 7th iteration. They do it every couple of years now. And it was designed for wounded, injured and sick military personnel, whether they're serving or have left the forces due to being medically discharged. So if you've had anything that has cut short your military career or curtailed your military career because you've been injured, whether that be physically or mentally, you qualify to compete at it. And it's not a selection process where you've got to be the fittest, fastest, whatever, it's strongest. It's one where it's what you'll gain from the recovery journey. So it's not about medals, although medals are awarded. Mm-hmm. It's about what you'll gain from it.
And what are you expecting to gain from it?
It's really hard to train and try to not think about having success at the end of it. Mm-hmm. But for me, my definition of success is, look, I want to be fitter, faster, lighter than I have been in recent years. And I want to have gained more confidence in myself by the end of the process, in terms of, because of the things which have affected me throughout my life, whether that be mentally or physically, it knocks your confidence. Mm-hmm. And I'm not that 20-odd-year-old person that could take on the world that I am in my 50s. But I'd like to get a bit of that back again, because I think with that confidence back and now with my experience, it could be quite phenomenal for me and for wherever I work or whatever I do.
Let's circle back a little bit in terms of, if you don't mind talking about it, what physically you went through. Mm-hmm. And I know you had a significant accident, which means...
Yeah, so I was medically discharged for mental health reasons. I had a few physical problems with my back, but that's probably to be expected from being in the military mm-hmm. for so long and carrying heavy weights and what we do. So I was originally medically discharged because I had recurrent depression and PTSD. And so I qualified for the Invictus Games by virtue of that. However, through part of my recovery from those mental health things, I do more physical things. I rely on physical activity to keep me well balanced and my well-being in check. And I unfortunately had an accident on my push bike over lockdown in 2020, the 1st of August 2020, where I broke my neck. I fractured my lower skull. I fractured vertebrae at C1, C2, C6, C7, T1, T2, and fractured my left shoulder socket. So it was a significant injury. I'm extremely fortunate to be able to move all my arms and limbs. I didn't really realise how significant it was until a few months down the line, mm-hmm. but that's another story entirely.
We'll come on to that a little bit later. In terms of, you were saying about what you want to achieve at going to the games, what's that training process been like in order to improve your fitness? And because I also know you are a high performing athlete anyway, whether you accept that and say that you are or not, but you have a strong fitness background anyway, right? Running numerous different events mm-hmm. and that sort of thing. So how much of a change has the training been, and how difficult have you found that?
So the thing that you mentioned there is I've ran the toughest, highest and coldest foot races in the world, though admittedly the first one was, I think, 12, 13 years ago now. So I ran the Marathon des Sables, I ran the Everest Marathon, and I ran the North Pole Marathon. The coldest, toughest, and highest is debatable, but for me, I picked on those three, and I definitely picked the North Pole Marathon because I thought, look, if I finish all three of those, I want to be on top of the world. And funny enough, they ran a marathon on top of the world, which was convenient. But my attitude to fitness then has changed to what it is now, and I'd say before, I wasn't giving the training that those events deserved. I trained hard. I really did. For the Marathon des Sables took me 18 months to train for, and you don't go in, I think because of the Marathon des Sables being 155 miles across the desert in 6 days, carrying all your kit minus tent and water, you've got to take it seriously. You can't just turn up and say, I'll be all right. Yeah. But I then started to realize that although I was probably doing all the running required for that, I wasn't looking at myself holistically. So I wasn't looking at my nutrition. I wasn't looking at my recovery. I wasn't looking at my sleep. But then again, I was probably young enough and vaguely fit enough to be able to cope with that. And now when I look at it, because I've been injured, I have to consider the full aspects of me holistically. So I look at the recovery, I look at my nutrition that I'm taking, I look at my weight, I look at it, which is connected with nutrition and feeding and things like that, and getting the right nutrients through protein and stuff like that. So now my attitude to fitness is very much taking not a scientific approach, but a more measured approach with everything I do. And that helps me as a person as well.
As much as you, by the sounds of it, definitely seen the benefits of that, has that been quite restricting at the same time?
Well, with the Invictus Games, because I've wanted to do it for so long, I've been involved with Invictus since I was medically discharged in 2016, and I'd applied for the Games. This was the fourth time I'd applied and been unsuccessful, which is difficult to take, but you accept it because you know there's people who'll benefit far better than you from it. But with this, I thought, look, I've wanted this for a long time. I don't want to go at it half-cocked. I don't want to take a half measure. So I took not a difficult decision. It was fairly easy. Then I said, right, I'm going to give up work for 6 months. And I'm in a position where I can do that. I mean, I'm not a multimillionaire or any stretch of the imagination, but I had enough backup and enough planned to be able to do this, and a supportive wife as well. So for me, I knew I'd dedicate myself to it. So from that, I then take everything where I can get help. So from yourself, through the sports massage and the sports therapy here, from a nutritionist that's helping guide me there, from a strength and conditioning coach, from my running coach at the athletics club down the road. And they're all people that bring me on side. So the other benefit of that is I'm surrounding myself with positive people. And with someone who's had bad mental health problems in the past, being around positive people is really important. You don't want that negativity when you're taking on something large. Yeah. There's always going to be doubt, but you can repress that with positivity. So, yeah.
How much have you utilized from your recovery period and learning about yourself in that recovery period post bike accident that you now take into the kind of training now? Is there anything from that you would say like you've brought forwards?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've surprised a few people with my attitude since the spinal accident. Before, when I was injured, I'd always try and push it too early and go back to running too early. And a really good example is when I had plantar fasciitis. It's a nightmare injury for a runner. You know, it's constantly there. You've got to really work at it, and you constantly are trying to push and going, oh, it feels all right today, I should be all right. And the next thing is you're out on a run and it goes back again within half a mile. And I had plantar fasciitis and I suffered with it for 18 months, which wasn't brilliant as a runner and an ultra runner at the time. So then I with the spinal injury, I just did everything that the medics and the doctors told me, because I thought my goal, I set 2 targets when I was in hospital the very next day. And I thought, look, my goal is just to get back to running initially. And my aim has always been, I want to run as late in life as possible, because running is important to me. I run every day. It's not recommended, but I'm not running a marathon every day. I could be just jogging a mile, and that's just to get me in the right headspace. So I thought I need to run. So when the doctor said, you can't do anything for 3 months, I just accepted it and went, okay, that's fine. And when they said I could run and I could only run 10 steps, I ran 10 steps. And yeah, that hurt. And there was a lot of painkillers and that involved. And it was really quite emotional. But I thought, no, just keep going. Just keep going. And the one thing that's always kept me going is the Churchill phrase of when you're going through hell, just keep going. And it's always stuck with me. So my attitude changed with the spinal injury. I took on board everything said and never pushed anything too soon. But, yeah.
What would you say to somebody that is in pain and can't do the things that they want to do, and they can't see the next step or the way out of where they want to be going towards, if that makes sense?
Crikey, well, the pain's going to be the major dominating factor. Mm-hmm. Pain's not right. Pain is caused through something, and my attitude is that something needs to be eliminated to stop the pain. From even as, being in the military or have been in the military, my benefit of that is my attitude to having an physical injury is always right. I need to get fit, mm-hmm. because my job in the military was to be fit to fight wars, etc. And if I can't do that, then I'm a waste of the taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
So my attitude to, I suppose, if you're in pain, first thing is try and sort out the pain, recover from the pain. But the other thing is find a way around. You might not be able to move. I've had a frozen shoulder in the past and things like that. You might not be able to move your arm fully, but you'll have a pain-free range of movement somewhere. So utilize that with the help of experts. Don't do it by yourself. With the help of people like you, with the help of physical training instructors and people who have the experience of it, do find a way around. There's always a plan B, as my coach says. Yeah. If you go up to the track, if you turn up to the track one day and you're saying, actually, my hamstring's pulling, I don't think I do speed work today. Right, there's always plan B. Yeah. So find a way around. It's almost the adapt, improvise, overcome. But again, listen to your body. Don't overdo it.
Yeah. Yeah. Accommodate. Yeah. But find that alternative path to keep moving forwards.
Yeah, because you're aiming for the single goal and you'll find a way to it.
Yes. Nice. Okay. What have you, kind of jumping between a couple of different things here, but in terms of your kind of games training process, because I take that as a different level of training to what you've been doing before. And by the sounds of it, you class it as two different levels of training just from a attitudes towards it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
What have you found the hardest part of your training?
For the Invictus?
Yeah.
I've always wanted to be a full-time athlete. Mm-hmm. Always. And I came to sport really late in life, like in my 30s, I suppose. And I've dreamed of this. And I got to this point where I'm going, full-time athlete, brilliant. I'm admittedly not at the level of the Olympians or stuff like that, but for me, it was really good. And what I found really difficult is it's really dull. Mm-hmm. Doing the same thing necessarily day in, day out, having the same routine, eating bland food. The first thing that really struck me was, this is dull. This is hard work. This is monotonous. And it really made me appreciate, I know you always do appreciate people who are brilliant at sports, Olympians, champions of whatever. But I suddenly went, yeah, they've really worked hard to get that gold, bronze, silver, whatever. So the first thing I found was just getting over the monotony. But once you're over that and you start finding ways of making the training not more interesting, but more like, okay, I just need to take it a step at a time. And I think I was probably overwhelmed at the start with the size of what I wanted to do. I'm 52 years old and I'll be competing against people in their 20s. That's part of the reason why I wanted to do this, because I didn't want to embarrass myself. But do the training, that is. But actually just do it a bit at a time. Right. I'm not doing a Nordic skiing event right now, but I need to go to the gym and do these back squats because that will improve my performance for when I'm using the poles to get over the slopes and things like that. So when it got monotonous, just broke it down into sizable chunks, really.
Got two things in there then. So one's not necessarily the hard part of the physical training. It's the consistency of doing the same things.
Yeah.
Without necessarily seeing that initial outcome.
Yeah. And consistency gives results.
Yeah.
You don't, we're in the new year, and I'm not criticizing people who go into the gym in the new year because it's a new year, new them. That's great. Positively encourage that. But you're not going to see results by going to the gym once or once every 2 weeks. Yeah. You need to go to the gym once a week, twice a week, whatever, preferably at the same time, and be consistent with what you're doing. And it might get dull, but you need to keep doing it.
That's when the hard work actually starts.
Yeah.
So talking about the events and then competing, what are you actually competing in?
Well, the ones I'm guaranteed to be competing in are Nordic skiing as a hopefully beginner, but I might end up intermediate advanced, and indoor rowing. And the indoor rowing is an adaptive level where you go flat out for 4 minutes and flat out for 1 minute.
Okay.
They're beautifully painful events. It's probably a nice way of saying it. And if I'm allowed to biathlon, which is Nordic skiing with a bit of shooting with a laser rifle, I can't do skeleton bob. I was down to do it, but if you've got a spinal injury, it's not recommended. I had done all the training for it. I had gone on the nursery slopes, for want of a better word, in Bath. There's a whole setup in Bath for it. But yeah, I'm probably pushing it too much.
I think you said to me your vision and what you could actually see in front of you. Was nothing.
I could literally see about 3 foot in front of me because I can't lift my neck up because of the injury. And I thought that was fine because there was only one corner, but I found out there's 6 corners, and the way you steer is by moving your shoulders in.
Yeah.
And I can't look up and move my shoulders in at the same time. And I think my spinal surgeon is not keen on seeing me again, to be quite honest. Yeah.
I don't think you're keen on seeing him either.
No, he's a great bloke. I mean, he saved my life, for want of a better word. But I've got a lot of time for him, but I probably would rather see him in nicer circumstances.
Yeah. So talk me through the application process for the events. Was that something you got to choose what you wanted to be put in for, or was it kind of allocated to you, your events?
No, you've got full choice. They like people to do a team sport and individual sport as a minimum. Individual, for me, the aspects of the team sports and what was required, which was sitting volleyball, wheelchair basketball, wheelchair rugby, weren't going to work for me for new purely individual sports. And there's a whole process before you apply of taster sessions, taster weekends. Do you want to do it? You've got to remember that many people who are involved in the Invictus Games as potential athletes, competitors, some of them have suffered to the extent of that weekend, that taster weekend is probably the first time they've left the house in 6 months. So it's about them getting used to that environment, and it's about us getting used to that environment. It's about us getting used to each other. And then at that end of that, you ask, do you want to apply? It's not guaranteed. If you're asked, do you want to apply, you get a place. And I think 350 people apply, 400 people apply every year, and there's 60 places on the team. So I was lucky enough to get one.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now we know what it's for attempts of trying to be a part of it as well, right? Because of how limited number of spaces there are to the... Yeah,
and it's limited on... The limits are technically because of the numbers which are available to compete at the entire games, which I think there's 500-600 athletes. So it's more of in my mind, it's more of a logistics accommodation problem. But the benefits for me of being involved in Invictus for so long, the reason why I joined an athletics club was because of Invictus. And now that athletics club is part of my identity. And I'd lost a major identity when I left the army. It's a big thing for those leaving the military, losing an identity, not putting a uniform on anymore. But now my uniform's been replaced by a track vest, and so on. And so actually the benefit, and that's all come from Invictus. So the benefits are really quite considerable.
I think identity loss is a massive thing that nobody really takes into account when people leave certain things. I know that I was international ballroom and Latin dancer for 14, 15 years.
Yeah.
One day went cold turkey, never did it again. And unless you fill it with other things and subconsciously and consciously think, I need to replace this, you can get very misled or
Yeah.
a huge sense of loss as a part of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also think that the identity, you can lose your identity through sport, through injury. Look, I think we've both had experiences of that. But that's why it's so important now to keep on top of the injuries, because it could restrict you losing something in your life that is really important to you, and you maybe not have realised how important that is. You know, I lost my career due to injury, albeit mental health initially. I didn't look after my mental health for most of my time in the military because life was running too fast, and I don't need to worry about that. So if we can change our attitudes to physical and mental health injuries, I suppose, to right, these are things we need to get sorted, because it just keeps you going longer, keeps your longevity, and it keeps that identity that you've got part of.
It also goes back to what you were saying earlier about when the doctors were telling you can't do anything for 3 months, and actually accepting that. Because if you don't follow that advice, you might get back to running quicker, but you won't sustain it.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean by that? Sometimes there is a short-term, pain's the wrong word, but restriction that allows you to then have another 30 years of doing it rather than another 3 years of doing it.
Yeah, certainly keep your mind on the big goal.
Yeah.
You know, what's the big objective here? When I was lying in hospital on day one, and I was in a side room, which I should have really worked out why I was in a side room. I just thought it was just convenient for them. And you placed in a side room, in my case, because they thought you were going to die. And I remember on day one, lying in the bed thinking I'd love to go running, because I used to run every day. I still run every day. And I thought, well, how can I get back to that? And I set myself a target of running in the British Masters Athletics Championships, which sounds grander than it is. You just have to enter. It's no precursor. And the other one was doing a triathlon. Now, I did both within around about the first year. The triathlon, I always used to do the Blenheim Triathlon. The last one I did, because the accident I had to do on a recumbent. It's not as fun. It's more challenging. On a recumbent, the cycle course on the Blenheim Triathlon I could do in 20 minutes. On a recumbent took an hour. But now what I'm finding with other things like my running, my challenge is to get as close to my pre-broken neck PB. And I've broke it for my 10K already.
Wow.
So only by a minute, but I say only.
That's a significant period of time when you're talking about running. And
I did choose a flat course. But yeah, so there's targets like that. I mean, the other long-term target I've got is to try and get as close I can to my pre-broken net 1,500 meters. And that's partly what the Invictus journey is doing for me, because I'm improving my fitness. I suppose the other aspect, without what waffling on, is I'm using Invictus as right, I need to get fit for the rest of my life. I need to, your body's the only one you've got, obviously, and I've had enough knocks in my life through broken necks, injuries, mental health issues and things like that. I thought I need to take time out to really look after this and build myself up, because hopefully that fitness, although I'm not going to stop it after the games, is going to sustain me for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I want to be that 78, 80-year-old runner running around the track, when I get to that age.
From my perspective, you're doing the right things, right? Yeah. We see it. I've got patients that are coming to us and are 80, 90, still deadlifting, still able to go up and down the stairs at home, still able to do everything they want to be doing, and are self-sufficient.
Yeah.
We've got other patients that haven't necessarily put the pre-work in, if you like, that are struggling and will continue to struggle. But it's never too late to start. Even if you're at that age, it's better to start now and maintain what you have than still let it decline. So you're definitely doing the right thing there.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose one of the other things is, if you go into fitness late in life and you're always worried. I mean, I don't like gyms. I'm having to go to a gym now because I have to do, as you get older, you need to do strength and conditioning if you want to.
You see the outcome of it as well, right? Yeah.
But, everyone's going to become self-conscious going into a gym because, I don't know, they're in the 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever. They haven't been in a gym for 30, 20 years. And I think the one thing to realise is no one in that gym is going to judge because they're in the gym for the same reason. And they were in that position. years ago or whatever, and they're always going to help. And one of the gyms that I go to in Southampton is a strong person's gym. I'm not a strong person; it's a strong man's gym. But everyone's training for different things, and you can learn a lot from each other as well. And nobody's turned around to me and gone, "You're quite skinny," sort of thing, or anything like that. What are you doing here?
Yeah.
And you should never find that in a gym. And if you do, find another gym. Simple as that.
Yeah. 100%. What are you most excited about going to the games?
Oh, crikey. I'm most excited about giving it my best shot. I want to be in a position where I'm on the start line and I can say, you know what, I've done everything that I could do. And it's like my attitude to exams when I was younger was, I realised the best feeling in the world was going into exam knowing that you'd done all the work to pass it, and the second best feeling in the world was coming out knowing you passed it. Now it's difficult when you're on a start line for an event. There's no pass mark. There is gold, silver, bronze, but I want to be on the start line knowing that I'm physically and mentally the best I can be for what I've been able to do in the preparation. So that's what and I'm looking forward to the challenge of competing with people who are on my level, as effectively an athlete which is adaptive. On the athletics track, I love the athletics track, but I'm never going to be competitive compared to other 50-year-olds. I'll be in the race. I'm probably going to be at the back. If I want to compete with people in my own race, I have to enter an open race, and I'm normally with 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds who are running at my pace. What I'm looking forward to with Invictus is I'll be competing with people on the same level. And we've all had our own story and injury to overcome to be there. So just being on the start line and ready, I think, is the thing I'm looking forward to the most.
Nice. Yeah. And embrace it.
Yeah, I love it.
Nice. Okay. Final question from me, and then I have maybe not final question, but final main question. And this is again another side thing, really. You have spent a lot of time with a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds. Who would you recommend we have a chat with on this podcast?
Oh, crikey. Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm now at the stage where I seek out people I want to talk to. I was lucky enough to go on a Steve Cram running camp a few weeks ago. And I did that purely because I wanted to talk to him about how he stops brain chatter on the 1500 meters. Brain chatter is where the negative thought, in my mind, is where the negative thoughts come into your head, because that can really affect your performance, which sounds high level and high performance, but, I'm not at his level. There's no way. So I'd say someone like Steve Cram, Steve Ovett, if you've got access, I'd have a look at the people like Steve Peters, and the chimp paradox type thing, because I think there's a lot mentally that can be gained from things. But I also think there's enough adaptive athletes locally in Southampton, Portsmouth area that you can look at. There's I'll probably get his name wrong, Aaron Phillips, the GB basketball, GB wheelchair rugby player, is local. He's inspirational.
I've had the pleasure of sitting in his company and listening to talk as well. Yeah.
He's really good. And there's people, Dave Henson, another adaptive athlete who's a lifetime member of Southampton Athletics Club, went through the Invictus journey, got a medal at Invictus, and then became a Paralympic sprinter. You don't have to go as far as the Steve Crams and Steve Peters for inspiration. You can find it locally, and there's always a story. And for me, I think have a look at adaptive athletes, because they have to overcome everything even before they get to the start line. My attitude to disability through being involved in Invictus has changed. I don't see someone with a disability. I see someone who's been able to take on problems and solve them. The fact that if you're in a wheelchair, you tell somebody to turn up to an interview, they've got to think about what's the route to that interview. Is there any stairs? How can I overcome those stairs? Is there a lift? How do I do all this? And they're doing that naturally. So I'd look at adaptive athletes and disability sport, and there's quite a few around.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
What haven't we touched upon that you'd like to talk about? Because I know you've made some notes. I think I've probably got nowhere near those.
No, you
notes.
have. You've touched on loads. I mean, mentally, I have 3 things that I always maintain, and it's the 3 rules of 3. And the first one, and I think which is probably the most important one, is if you're looking at yourself holistically, then consider what's really important to you as a human being. And for me, I have to get the right balance between my food intake, the amount of phys I'm doing, and the amount of sleep I'm getting. And if I get that balance wrong, then things start to go wrong in my life. You know, I can have a few days where I'm only having 4 hours sleep a night because of whatever reason, you know, crisis at home, work, whatever. But I then need to capture that up. You know, if I'm on the road a lot, you know, I'm not necessarily going to eat good food, but I can plan ahead and take some good food with me. But then I need to counter that down the line. So food, phys, and sleep are important. I think also look at your life and realize where you're working in your life. We all have something called an emotional regulation system. And your emotional regulation system, you generally work under threat. Mm-hmm. So if somebody's challenging you, you're trying to get a contract at work, on a running track, if someone's coming up on your shoulder and you think you can hold them. We work on drive because we want to get that contract at work. We want to get a promotion. We want to get more recognition, or we want to get a personal best on the running track. But what we never look at is soothe. And soothe is, for me, really important. If you look at your week, your last week, and go, I've been working in threat, I've been working in drive, you can identify that, but you very rarely identify when the soothe is. And that's when you look after yourself. That's when you go and say, you know what, I'm going to have that bath. I'm going to listen to that podcast, maybe this podcast, and I'm going to take time out for myself to recuperate. And then finally, I think feel, do. If you think you're not very good, mm-hmm. if you think you're rubbish, you're going to feel rubbish. You're going to do things to compound that rubbish. So you're going to think badly, you're going to feel bad, and you're going to do things to compound it. So it's like, oh, I don't feel very fit, or I feel unfit, or I feel like I'm a bit of a loss at the moment. So and you're going to be thinking that as well, but I won't go to the gym this week, sort of thing, or I won't go out on that run. So you've got to break yourself out of that negative cycle. And it's really easy for me personally to get into a negative cycle, but I've got to spot it and do things to break it. And that's like force yourself to go to the gym, ring up your mate and say, should we go out running tomorrow? Mm-hmm. And so you're forced to go out because your mate's going out running or something like that. But so
there's 2 parts to that: is spotting it, and then that's step 1. Yeah. Sometimes the hardest.
Yeah.
And if you can find that, you can take the action. To then move
you're going to feel rubbish. You're going to think you're rubbish. You're going to do something to compound it. Mm-hmm. So break it at the do something positive to change it, and then
that feeds back into the negative self-talk and negative critic type scenario that you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah. So it's just break yourself out of it. It's a difficult step to take, but once it's there, it becomes easier. So threat, drive, soothe. Work out when you're soothing yourself each week.
I was grinning from ear to ear when you said that, because I looked back on my own week and went,
Yeah. You've got to take some time out. And then food, phys, and sleep is me the crucial thing. And I monitor these all week, every week, not religiously like, oh, how much have I slept? At the end of the week, you know, we're all blessed by things like Garmin. Garmin send me a report every week, how much I've slept. I always do a cursory glance at that and go, yeah, I'm a bit behind this week. I need to catch up. So yeah, they're for me the important things.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Rob. Very much appreciate it. And what I would love to do is get you back on the podcast after you've been to the games.
Yeah.
And we talk about that experience.
Yeah, when I'm lying on this table or fixing all my injuries, yeah, it'll be fine. But at least I'll be knowing there's a clear goal to getting the injuries fixed.
What last thing for me really is, have you looked past the games and what you want to achieve after that? Or
well, I have to go back to work. So that's
that little hurdle to cross.
That's a hurdle. But I'm starting to have a really good. I've been thinking about it all along, and I think over the next couple of weeks I'm going to really put some deep thought into that, and using what is the grow model, the goal, the reality of what I want, what the options are, and what the way forward is. So I'm going to have a look at that. But I think really beyond the games, I want to keep this fitness going. I want to try and have a good season on the running track. And I just want to see where that takes me. I have got a goal, an aspiration in a few years' time, which involves a rowing boat in the Atlantic and a few friends.
Which you've mentioned to me previously.
But we'll see how that goes. And that actually is scaring me, which is probably means I probably need to do it.
Well, you defined yourself as a person that does extraordinary things, so...
Well, yeah, sometimes, yeah.
If you look back on track record.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you when you're back.
Yeah, pleasure.
Cheers, Rob.